You're listening to the Confidence Within podcast. If you are a successful professional entrepreneur who is nonetheless struggling with the fear of public speaking, then you are in the right place. This podcast is all about igniting your inner confidence, learning to show up with genuine authority and brilliance, and becoming the best version of yourself. I'm your host, Victoria Lesnyansky, and welcome to my show. Hello and welcome to another episode of the Confidence Within podcast. My guest today is Jasmine Katatikarn. Jasmine is a multi-passionate creative and entrepreneur who has found confidence in the art of pivoting. With over 20 years of experience in animation and tech, Jasmine has learned that the only constant in life is change. And by the way, when I say animation, I mean working on everyone's favorite features like Ice Age, Rio, and Epic. As a co-founder of the Academy of Animated Art, Jasmine has turned her passion for teaching into a successful online school that generates 6 figures in sales each year. But that's not all. She also manages a full-time job at a Fortune 100 company, has a coaching business, and is a dedicated mom to 2 young children. I really love how Jasmine has embraced each pivot in her life as an opportunity to grow and evolve. Through her journey, she has learned that confidence isn't about being perfect or having it all figured out. Instead, it's about embracing your imperfections and having the courage to pursue your passions. Please welcome Jasmine to the show. Well, hello, Jasmine, and welcome to the Confidence Within podcast. I'm so excited to invite you. I'm so excited you're here.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be here too.
And you and I met a couple of years ago. We were part of the same business mastermind. And I remember meeting you virtually back then, and then we actually met in person in New York. But I remember meeting you virtually, and I remember thinking, wow. First thought is that you're one of the most confident people that I have ever met. One of the most interesting people. And in case I haven't mentioned, which I think I have, you became an instant celebrity in my family, because as soon as I told my kids, guess what? Guess who I met? I met someone who's worked on Ice Age, the dawn of the dinosaurs, and on Epic, and on Rio, and my kids grew up on those movies, like literally watched them a million times. And so they're like, oh, it's Miss Jasmine. Oh no, let's look at the credits. Let's find Miss Jasmine. So you are a celebrity in my house. But I am so excited to chat with you because you have a very, very interesting story. You have a very interesting and unusual career path. And I'd love to start by asking you, when you were a kid, did you want to go into art? Did you want to become an animator? Was it ever a part of your dream, or you were just really good at art and design?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I will say, I know you can't see me, but when you say confident, and one of your first impressions of me when you met me is confidence, that's shocking to me because, confidence was not something I had, especially as a child. And it did take me, even today, I think I'd kind of blush if someone said I was confident, because it's funny, you always think of yourself back, when you were young. And to me, I was actually the opposite. I was like very shy, to a point where I wouldn't even speak out loud because I was that shy and not super confident. So that means a lot that you say that. And I think it does speak a lot to kind of like the growing of confidence and how it's not something necessarily you're born with. It's something that, continues to grow within. But to answer your question, as a child, I did always love art. I love creating. I remember, if I had the choice, I just want to draw all day. I thought it was normal, right?
So when the time came for you to decide what you're going to do in life and, talk to your parents and decide on colleges, did you think that you're going to make art and design your career path, or did you think that something else may make more sense?
As much as I knew, like when you asked me, did I love art when I was a child, and I instantly said yes, the same way if you ask me, oh, can I do art? Can I have a career in a creative, anything? I would also be confident saying no, I couldn't, because at in very early age, I was basically not told, but like highly suggested, have pretty much told, as a child that I can't take my art seriously. It's a hobby, right? Oh, that's so nice you like to draw, but you need to be a doctor. Like that was basically honestly what I was told for most of my childhood, up into, applying for schools. One of my biggest memories was in fifth grade, I took a mechanical drawing class and I loved it. I still remember being in the room and doing these mechanical drawings where it's like a combination of, drawing, but then it's technical. It's like kind of what I saw as like an architect doing, or maybe industrial designer or something. I didn't know industrial design at the time, but I remember I came home so excited and I said, I want to be an architect. And I was like smiling, and I just wanted to do it all the time. And I swiftly told, no, you can't be an architect because I know this person it's a very hard career path and you'll be miserable and all that stuff. And, I say that now and I know, you know, who said it meant the best, right? They're looking out for you. They only want to protect you in a certain way, make sure you're secure financially. So they didn't mean like that's just the culture, right? So
Yes.
it was squashed really quickly. And I still like it was a pivotal moment, I think. And now that I think back, like what is squashed about that is my honestly like confidence is squashed, right? Like I remember being so like I knew it. Like, when you just know something, I love that. But then I was instantly told, no, you can't. And then I think what ended up happening is like, okay, I was like, I need to be pre-med. I still took art on the side. All through high school. Like I even took AP art. I did have a portfolio in art because, I wanted to keep that, but I knew I could never take it seriously. I was like, oh, it's just a hobby. And I still remember when I was applying for colleges, I really wanted to apply to an art school just for fun. Like I still remember this. I'm like, what if I just applied to RISD or something? Like, I just want to see. And then I was like, no, I can't do it. It's not a possible option. And so I didn't. And, I went more the traditional route. I did go to a very good college. I went to Vassar College, which I love. I actually met my my partner there. So, everything happens for a reason. I had a great time there. I started out pre-med because I was meant to be a doctor. So I did follow that path. So my first year I was pre-med, and I realized that after the end of my first year, I just didn't enjoy it. Like I was going through the steps and I was like, I don't think I can do this. Like looking at, the work, the pipeline for a doctor, right? That's a long, you gotta love it. And I remember at that point I was talking to people like that were also pre-med, but then my father's a doctor actually. So like I kind of knew, and he it's ironically, he was never pressing me to be a doctor. I was talking to people and they're like, you need to love it in order to go down this path because it's a long path. And if you're not loving it now, it's just you might be miserable, right? And I was like, you're right. I don't think I can sustain this. So my next move after I decided I didn't want to be pre-med is what I actually did. I was taking an art class, and then part of me was like, ooh, maybe I should go to art. But then I was like, no. Still at this point in life, I was like, I can't do it. It's not a possible choice. I'll be miserable if I go down that way, right? And I was like, what's the next, practical thing that people won't get upset with me if I go into? And I was like, economics. I'm going to be an econ major. I'm going to go into finance. It's going to be okay, So that's exactly what I did. I became an economics major, and I have an undergrad degree in economics. And I did do a minor in art history because that was my way of like keeping the creative side on. I'm like, oh, I'll just do the minor. So I do have a minor in art history. I think I have these points in life where I am faced with like the moment where I'm making the decision, similar to pre-med, right? When I was just like, wait, should I really do this? And then it's like that moment is like, no. It's like a check, like, no, let me try something else. And at that point, I was like, okay, economics. And then for the economic standpoint, I started, it was the spring of my senior year of college, and I was going to all the finance interviews, like the big finance, investment banking firms in New York City, and I was getting really good interviews. I still remember I had like the business suit. I had it, I was definitely all in that part. And it was I think it was my third interview with one of these firms. And I still remember it was like one of those big conference tables, mostly male, and I'm like at the head and they're just drilling me with questions. And one of the last questions they asked me, a very simple question, was, why do you want to be in finance? And it was that moment in my head. I still remember I was just like, you don't want to do this. Don't do this. And I left that interview and I never went to another interview again. I stopped, I canceled all my interviews and I said, enough. I can't do this. And at this point, I was 21. So it's taken me quite a while to kind of gain this, I guess, for like confidence in myself of what I want and what I don't. And it was only until that moment that I was like, I don't know what I want to do, which is, somewhat terrifying now that I look back to it as an adult, right? That it was kind of a courageous moment of like, I have this economics degree. I just turned down these, investment banking interviews. I'm going to go a totally different path. And I never really learned anything other than just drawing on my own. So I'm like, let me take this thing called Photoshop, like some computer classes, right? So I took like the most basic classes you could find and I learned and I loved it. And that's when I started like, okay, it's like that moment when I was fifth grade, like imagine all that lost time, right? Where I was like, this is what I love doing. I felt like in the flow, people talk about being in flow and like really enjoying. I was like, and I was good at it too, right? It just came so easily to me. So I took these classes over the summer and I created a portfolio. I don't even know how, like just out of nothing. And the crazy thing is I still look back at this time and I was able to get a job that fall. So not even that long of a gap. It wasn't like I was like years, I was trying to learn the craft. Within that fall, I got a job as a junior package designer at Godiva Chocolatiers, the chocolate company in New York City. And it was amazing. I was just like, oh, okay. Yeah, maybe I wasn't making the money I would have in finance, but I was on my way, right? And I was finally doing something that was mine. And I felt confident that I loved to do. And then on the flip side, I will say the teacher that taught me the basic Photoshop and Illustrator classes that summer, he was actually a 3D person. Like he focused a lot of his time on 3D arts. And at that point, I had no idea. I had never seen a 3D application before. I don't have that origin story. I have a lot of friends now and old coworkers that have that origin story of like, oh, they knew that they wanted to be a 3D artist as soon as they watched some animated film, like when they were a kid. I don't have that story. I just like I didn't even know it existed. And this person was like, oh, you're picking up the Photoshop and the 2D applications really quickly. Take a look over here. You might find this interesting. And he showed me this software at the time. I think it's 3D software. And I was like, I remember my eyes got like, what is this? And I got so excited. And he kind of showed me, and that was like my first snippet of 3D, which eventually led me to going to grad school for 3D to get my master's in that. So I did end up getting a traditional education of some sort in the creative fields. But it took me until I was like 23 years old to do so. But even without that, I don't think I needed the master's, to be honest with you. But like it helped me kind of then launch my 3D career, the part of where I'm working on Ice Age and all those movies.
But what's interesting to me is that I'm just so curious. So that summer, when you stopped looking for a job and you realized, okay, I am going to change my life forever. I am stopping everything that I've been doing, and I'm making this huge pivot towards what I always wanted to do. Did you feel a lot of doubt? Did you feel a lot of pressure from your family? How were the outside influences playing out in relation to you knowing that you are making the right decision? And what made you feel that you're making the right decision? Because a lot of people are in this situation.
Yeah. I think a lot of my pressure was self-pressure, like even to this day, right? I think I'm my worst critic, right? I'm the hardest on myself. When I did make the decision, my family did not disown me. They were, I'm sure they were worried, but they didn't necessarily like put it on me that they're worried. At that point, I was living at home. I graduate. Oh, well, after graduation, I did move back at home, so it wasn't. I didn't take on. I didn't have to pay for rent or anything like that. But I do remember that like, oh my God, feeling. I had very minimal amount of money too, right? I did pay for I paid for the classes on my own because I had done internships, in the past in between colleges. So I had some money saved up, but not very much. Like looking back, I remember looking at my bank account at one point and it had like $150 in it. I was like, huh. It's like, this is interesting. I mean, as an adult now, I think as a younger person, I was much braver in that way because it's like it's all relative. But like the one thing that I'll say, it felt right. I know that sounds like, I don't know, not like a solid thing, but for the first time, it was really for the first time, I was finally breaking out of the mold that other people expected of me and saying, wait, no, I don't want to do this. What do I want to do? Who am I? It's kind of that finding what you really like instead of trying to please others and fit to what they think success looks like or where your path should be. So for me, it was exciting. It was liberating. It was the first time where I felt like I was finally using my voice for myself. It was one of my first pivots of confidence, right? Because I will say, up until then, I was a very quiet person. Like I was kind of like not super sure. I remember in college meeting people that were very confident, very like outspoken, and they knew what they wanted. And I was not that person. I was kind of quiet to the side, I wasn't sure. I wasn't sure of anything. And for the first time, I was like, I am sure that this is my path. And as soon as I started taking the classes and I started letting myself think that I could be creative in a career, then I was like, this is where I'm meant to be. The possibilities all of a sudden opened up for me, where if I think about it, I felt kind of like contained, right? Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, I need to fit into this box, but it just never felt right. But I was doing it. It was my first action as an adult, especially to find myself, figure out what I want. And it's scary, but that's where it's like, it's a good scary. When you feel that, growth is happening, you're gonna, it's those scary moments that are actually the most pivotal and impactful in your life.
Right. And I think you really need to learn to listen to yourself.
Yeah.
And that comes, funny to say it, but it comes with age, it comes with experience, really. It is interesting how sometimes the people who are closest to us are the ones who are putting the restraint and constraints on us and not letting us grow, because exactly how you mentioned, they really want us to feel safe without realizing that by putting us into certain constraints, they are limiting our growth. And I think a lot of people of the older generations, especially, they're not as open to changes within you and to growth in general, like our generation and younger generations are. And it's so interesting because I remember, like, listening to you, I just keep on reliving my story where I was making my pivots, and I remember feeling how I'm scared, but exactly how you said, it felt right.
Mm.
It felt that I'm doing something that may not be the right decision because I cannot see the future and I cannot see down the road if this was the right decision or not. But it feels like the right decision for me at this time. And I think it's very important to listen to your gut, to listen to yourself, and to feel what's right, because more often than not, we may not feel when something is right, but we certainly feel when something doesn't feel right. And it's very, very important to be able to distinguish those feelings. And with your story, that was not the end of your pivots. You started a business on the side. You decided to become an entrepreneur. Talk about that. How did that feel?
Yeah, I mean, so I will say I feel like I always had this entrepreneurial side in me. There's always something about me that just loved inventing, creating something from nothing. So I had dabbled like with side hustles in a way, but not super seriously. Again, kind of like it's interesting, kind of like art. Like I kind of did it, but it was like kind of my hobby type thing. Where I started the Academy of Animated Art is when I was in my career working on feature animation, and I was going on recruiting trips for my studio. And I was going on recruiting trips looking at students' reels, which are like their portfolios essentially. And no one had a portfolio good enough to get them that job. And I came back to the studio and I was talking about it. And I was like, why? And I was talking to my coworker about it. I was like, and who had also gone recruiting trips, like, no one's learning anything they need to know in school. And it's sad. You spend so much money, so much time in school, and yet you need to get a job to learn like the actual traits of, good lighting specifically from my point of view. And we kind of looked at each other like, well, why don't we just create that? And that's how the Academy was born. And what was exciting is it's like another form of creativity, creating something, and there's a business side. And that's where I kind of joke about, everything comes back into play. Like, when you're creating a business, then, that economics background was good in certain ways. That is actually what really helped build a lot of my confidence that I have today, because through the Academy, one, it was communicating with a different audience. Also, and I was speaking to a lot of students, but then I would have to speak, on panels and just in lectures more as a teacher. And, talking about like building confidence is speaking out loud, right? Not only being isolated to whatever you're working on, especially as an artist, right? It's very easy to kind of like be heads down and never have to speak in public. But I think that is really what also helped kind of create, and I often say like designing your life, like designing my career in ways that I would never have imagined. I mean, imagine when I was studying economics, if you had told me like, one, I'm not going into finance, I'm actually in 3D animation, like, wait, what's 3D animation? And then also like, oh, I started a school, now I'm in education. And it's interesting how ways turn around and how your paths kind of grow organically. And I think one of the things to be said about this, similar to, now that I'm thinking about, similar to how, I felt like it was right. Like I just kind of feeling out what I enjoy doing. And at that point in my career, I had been doing 3D animation for quite a while. And I found talking to students and getting that energy from them too, of like wanting to learn and also impacting lives, right? People want to get into this field. How can I help them? And that was something that surprised me, that honestly I was interested in. But when it came about, like it's what sustains me to this day to run the Academy. Like those messages from students that I got my first job, and it's changed everything. I had another email that said they can now support their parents back home because of the jobs that they've gotten because of the school. Like, that's amazing. And I think with every choice, every pivot, every like kind of direction that feels right, it aligns. It's really interesting.
You know, sometimes people look at the past and they go like, oh, I wish I didn't do this, or I wish I did this. And they kind of look at their career path or their educational path or anything that they've done with a sense of something wasn't right. Whereas the way I look at it is every single thing that I have done served me to be where I am today. Even though something may have looked like a detour, something looked like, oh, I didn't need that. But every year, every single year, I'm finding out that I am picking up more and more pieces from the past. And now that big puzzle is making more and more sense. Don't you see how you look at your life and the puzzle is making sense all of a sudden?
I completely agree with that 110%. Like I often say life is like a puzzle to me now, and I'm just kind of like the seeing where the puzzle pieces fit together and where they can work together. But yeah, I completely agree. Everything compounds onto another thing, even if you feel like it's completely separate. And I felt like that because I do other things too, which I'm sure you're going to touch upon. And I just felt like I was, at some points, I thought to myself, I remember, you know, I'd be working on my academy, I'd be doing the 3D animation side, I'd be doing other things. I'm like, wow, I'm so scattered. I remember thinking, like, I need to get my stuff together. Why am I so all over the place? But now, from my perspective, where I sit now, it totally makes sense. It's all part of me, and it's all kind of different puzzle pieces. And they all end up fitting together really well, like in ways you would never expect. So I often say that to someone, it's like, oh, I wasted my time. Like, I mean, I even think I'll go so much, you know, I said all that time was wasted between like I knew I wanted to go into arts, but I studied, you know, pre-med to econ. I was like, yeah, I probably my path could have been different, but at the same time, maybe I wouldn't be exactly where I am today. And I actually 100% believe that. Like there's so many ways that, you know, your life kind of, there's no wrong way. As long as you look at everything as an opportunity, keep your mind open. And also, just like you said, read yourself, know yourself, and understand yourself. And then you can't go wrong, right? It's kind of that thing, like as long as you follow it, your instincts, your gut. I often say that, like, what's your gut telling you? What do you really want to do? And it could be scary, but often that's the way where you all of a sudden you look back and you're like, oh, now it all makes sense. Instead of maybe looking back, following a path that you didn't want to go in, and then you wonder like, why? You know, I think that's when you look back and you're like, I'm not sure about that. It's when you ignore yourself and you just kind of follow maybe what someone else expects of you.
Yeah, right. And you know, when we met, I kind of thought you were already super busy. You were working full time, probably even more than full time, because I remember you were talking about how sometimes you had to work more. You had Academy of Animated Art, which is a really big business in itself, and you were putting a lot of time into that. You are a mom of two wonderful kids. And then at the same time, you said, I want to start another business.
Yes.
And that became another pivot or another addition to the life that you live in. So what did you decide to do?
So I decided to become a certified coach for a specific reason, a couple of reasons, but one of them was due to my own, like I said, it's kind of everything I do and creates, it's often what I wish I had, and there's a need for it, how I can help in like from my own journey. So I actually went through quite a fertility journey of trying to have kids of my own, to the point where I was told I would not be able to have kids after 5 years of trying. And it wasn't until around my sixth year that I was able to become pregnant. And it was because of that journey. Now I do have two amazing kids. I'm so grateful for them every day. And I think it's partly due to this journey, like talking about like things happen, not for a reason, but like everything, you know, kind of relate to one another. I often say, like, honestly, if I didn't go through the journey I went through to have kids, I probably wouldn't appreciate and be the mom that I am today, right? So everything's related. And because of my journey, and then also just because of my interactions with other creatives and artists, I was like, I would love to help others. Like, how can I help guide others and coach them essentially? And that is why I decided to become a certified coach and start helping. So, it started with fertility, and then it also really went down the line towards like creative coaching to help creatives think outside the box and design their own lives. And essentially what I had been doing this whole time too, and just how can we live, our best lives? I know that sounds cliche, but that's exactly why I did what I did and became a certified coach and started working with people. And that again, I think what I realized, as I think this is also like as you get older, it's like, how do you want to leave a legacy, right? Or like, what kind of impact do you want to make? I was recently asked on someone's like, do you feel like you've made an impact? And I was like, actually, yes, I do. It's through my students, it's through the coaching. I mean, I think that's what it comes down to in the long run when we're talking about different ways of like how we're living our lives. I didn't need the money when I created the academy or for coaching. My single day, like the day job, was more than enough, right? So none of this was driven towards like financial, like, oh, I'm gonna, get rich and do this. So I think that's really important to note, especially for coaching. It's like, yeah, some will be like, why would you spend your time? It's like, because it felt good. It felt right. Like I wanted to expand my ability to help others and my skill sets. And it's interesting how it seems so disconnected. And it felt disconnected when I was doing it, but I was just interested in. So it's kind of like, yeah, that's true. I'm going to go do that, right? I was just kind of feeling what I felt inside. And now that actually led to another pivotal moment in my career that I could never have expected. I didn't want worlds to collide, right? It's like the academy is in one bucket here, my full-time job as an artist is here. Now I have my creative coaching here in this bucket. So like they were all separate to me. I didn't think they were connected in any way, but I had an additional pivot after that really confirms how everything's kind of a puzzle and continues to kind of build on one another.
This show is brought to you by my Brilliant Speakers Academy program. Brilliant Speakers Academy is an in-depth coaching program for high-level professionals and entrepreneurs. It's designed to obliterate your fear of public speaking for good, drastically improve your communication and presentation skills, and help you show up with genuine confidence, authority, and brilliance. To learn more about the program, go to www.brilliantspeakersacademy.com.
I got laid off from my studio closed. The Blue Sky Studios that made Ice Age closed. 500 artists out of a job in a day, right? And that could be a real tragedy. I mean, it is a tragedy, but what's the opportunity there? And for me, if, when we were faced with these not ideal situations, for me, that was super pivotal because I was looking back, I was talking to some old coworkers, it gave us all this opportunity. And a lot of us, I had been there for over 10 years at that point, and I had coworkers that had been there for 20 years. And we were saying, if it had not closed down, we probably would still be there. And life would be very different right now. But something that seemed bad at the time was actually an amazing opportunity to explore new things and to, discover. And like where I am today, I feel like I leaped. I like, it was like quantum leaps for me in growth. So if you're ever faced, I'll say with like, a challenging moment, that's actually when the most growth usually happens. And if you look for the opportunities, and I was saying to some of my coworkers, like making, what's that term? Making lemonade out when you're giving lemons, make lemonade. I'm all about that. And if you look at it from that perspective, it's actually an amazing opportunities in those moments. So now I'm in a role where I'm utilizing my 3D background and I get to grow my coaching skills and experience, which is what my focus has been on the past couple of years. I will say this position is growing my confidence even more, because now not only do I already have that artist experience, now I'm getting that more of that manager leadership experience, more of the voice that, what things that I necessarily didn't have being an artist. So I think it's so interesting if you just keep on following these kind of interests that you might have that might feel random at the time. It all works out, and it keeps you moving forward. It keeps you interested. I think that's what's really interesting. Like, no longer do we necessarily have one career your whole life. Like, the opportunities are limitless. To say the least. So I think that's what's so exciting.
So, what advice would you give someone who is maybe currently at a job that they may not be too excited about, but it's paying the bills? Somebody maybe who wants to start a business, or somebody who wants to move to a different career, or simply find a different job. What advice would you give to them when they are feeling sort of stuck and not knowing what to do?
I would say, one, what do you enjoy doing? And also think about when you were a child, maybe even like go back to then, because often, like you asked me the very first question when you were a child, like, what did you enjoy doing? I loved art. I love creating. And essentially that's what I ended up realizing I needed to have in my life to kind of spark that joy, spark that happiness. Like, if you look at kids, they just they just choose what they love. So I think that's the first thing. Like, what is it that you could do all day and love doing? The second thing is, I am a very practical person in the fact that I'll never be that type of person who's like, oh, just quit everything and go for it, right? I mean, when you do find whatever you're interested in, whatever sparks that joy for you, start doing it. Start doing it on the side, right? At first, like, because a lot of the times, I will also say, we often feel like we need one thing to do everything for us, where it's like, we need that one job that's going to make us happy. We need that one partner that's going to do, like, just fulfill my whole life. That's a lot of expectation on one thing. And similar to, like, if we think of partners, yes, you have maybe a partner that you have maybe a family with, but then you have that best friend over there that fulfills that other need, right? There's a combination of, relationships and friendships and family that you might have in your life that kind of creates whatever that perfect balance is for you. And the same thing goes with career, right? You don't necessarily need to put all the pressure on your one job to do it all for you, because that's a lot of pressure. The same way if you depend on your spouse to do everything, right? To fulfill every part of, your relationships that you need in life. So that's actually how I approach careers now. And this is why people ask me sometimes, like, why do you keep this full-time? Why do you keep this tech job? Why do you run the academy? Why don't you just choose one? And it's actually, going back to the puzzle analogy, I think of everything as puzzle pieces, where it's like each one has its purpose for me. It's like a different relationship. It fulfills certain needs, and I get excited for both, like, at this point. So what I'm saying is, okay, let's say your current job is a puzzle piece that gives you the financial stability that you need right now. Okay, that's needed, right? It's a thing. Let's put it in your puzzle. But where else, what else is needed in that puzzle that you can fill in? And maybe it's that, you're always passionate about, I don't know, woodworking or something, right? Oh, well, let's see how we can fulfill that right now and not have it like, it doesn't need to take over the financial. You already have that piece there. But maybe I'll take a woodworking class over here. Oh, okay, there's a puzzle piece. I'm going to put it there. And that's when you start kind of playing with whatever your puzzle is. And then you never know what happens from there, right? Maybe you take that woodworking class and that leads to you meeting someone else that might have an opportunity, or maybe it sparks like an idea of how you can take your skills, the skills in the woodworking, to maybe something that you already have and combine that. So like you said, Victoria, it's like you never know. It always works out, all your experiences, and they kind of create your own puzzle. I'm all about testing and iterating. Actually, that's one of my big things. It's like a design process. It's like prototyping. You test and iterate, you might not even like it, honestly. Like it might take you a couple tries to figure out what you like, but the big thing is to start testing small as possible, just to get you started, and then going back to, how does it make you feel?
I think this is such great advice, because life is very interesting, very unexpected, and it has a lot of surprises. Never stop trying, never stop growing, never stop learning, never stop living your life, because living the life is the most exciting part about life. Not just existing, not just, I go to my job and make my money and I go home. And no, be excited about who you are, about what you can do, and about how far you can grow. I think that's really the most important thing. Well, Jasmine, thank you so much. This has been really a joy and pleasure. If my audience wants to know more about you, how can they do that?
Yeah, they can find me on social media and Instagram at JazzKatat, JazzKatat, or jazzkatat.com would be where the coaching would be. If you're interested in the Academy, you can find academyofanimatedart.com. And yeah, other than that, for business or, professional, I'm also on LinkedIn.
Great. Jasmine, thank you so much. I really, really appreciate your time. I really appreciate you coming here. I really appreciate you sharing your story and sharing your advice. I know this is going to change somebody's life. So thank you. There you have it. I hope this conversation inspired you to embrace your journey with all of its ups and downs and continue putting together this amazing puzzle with even more curiosity and passion. And as always, if you need help overcoming the fear of public speaking and developing unshakable speaking confidence, check out my Brilliant Speakers Academy at www.brilliantspeakersacademy.com. I'll talk to you next week. Bye for now.